Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. To Kill a Mockingbird. By Harper Lee. Harper Lee's breakthrough work To Kill a Mockingbird was released in the United States in 1960. To this day, the novel is still frequently taught in classrooms because it was one of the first to deal with racial discrimination and rape. Harper Lee wrote the book based on an incident that occurred in her small, southern town in the 1930s. In this sense, it's considered part of the Southern Gothic genre. To Kill a Mockingbird tells the narrative of Scout Finch, a 6-year-old girl growing up in the 1930s in the little Alabama town of Macomb. Her father Atticus is a widowed lawyer, and Scout lives with her older brother, Jem. Scout and her brother become friends with Dill, a young boy who spends the summers in Macomb with his aunt. Dill quickly becomes enamored with an ancient, creepy house on their block as the children play. It's the home of Arthur Radley, known as Boo, a reclusive shut-in who Scout and Jem tell him resides there. Boo Radley begins to appear in the children's imaginations, and they begin getting gifts from him via the knothole of a tree in his yard. A black man named Tom Robinson has been accused of rape by a white woman, and Scout and Jem's father, Atticus, is asked to defend him. Atticus' willingness to take up the case has outraged the white residents of Macomb, who have shunned and abused him and his children as a result. An innocent man's life is at stake, and Atticus must confront a crowd of his former friends and neighbors in order to do it. A young girl, Jean Louise Finch, known as Scout, tells us a bit about her family and her father, Atticus Finch, in the beginning. One of the few residents of Macomb, Alabama, where Atticus lives, is a well-respected attorney. Most of the rest of town has been heavily hit by the Great Depression. Calpurnia, the Finch's chef, also serves as a housekeeper and helps raise the family's children in their Macomb home. During the summer of 1933, Scout is just 6 years old and her brother is 10 years old. Charles Baker Harris, a 12-year-old boy visiting his aunt from out of town, moves in next door that summer. His aunt Rachel has invited Dill, who goes by the moniker Dill, to spend the summer with her and her family in Florida. After only a few days, Scout and Jem had made a friend in Dill, and the three of them began playing together frequently. Scout tells Dill about a decaying house he's seen on their block and the two discuss it. She tells him that Nathan Radley lives there with his brother, Arthur, whom everyone nicknames Boo, and that the house belongs to them. No one knows why Boo Radley is a recluse who hasn't come out of his house in years. According to a legend among the town's youth, Boo was once imprisoned in the house by his father after getting into some legal difficulties as a young lad. Scout has no proof of this. He wasn't seen for 15 years, until he stabbed his father with scissors 15 years after that. Nathan, Boo's older brother, moved in with the family after his father's death, despite the town's belief that he was insane and should be placed in an institution. When Scout and Jem hear of Dill's plan to entice Boo out of his house, they become enamored with the tale. Not getting far, he challenges Jem to run up and touch the house, which he does in a hurried manner before rushing back across the grass. A shutter on the Radley house appears to be moving slightly, as if someone were peeping through it, according to Scout. Dill returns to his mother's house at the conclusion of the summer, and the Finch children get ready for the start of school. It's Scout's first year, and she's looking forward to the new challenges that come with it. She immediately learns, however, that Miss Caroline, her instructor, does not care much about children and appears to openly despise them. Upon her return home, Scout tells her father that she no longer wishes to go to school, and asks him if he would be willing to tutor her instead. Atticus promises to keep reading to her and teaching her whenever he can, despite the fact that she must attend school by law. Scout finds tinfoil in a knothole in one of the Radley's trees as she walks home from school one day. 2 pieces of gum are hidden within the tinfoil. Before Jem can make Scout spit out the chunks she chewed, she learns of Scout's behavior and orders her to stop. After a short while, the 2 kids discover 2 antique Indian head pennies tucked away in the same knothole and decide to keep them instead. Dill returns for the summer, and the 3 friends pick up right where they left off. In contrast to previous times, they've started playing a game they call Boo Radley, in which they act out the story of the Radley clan as they know it themselves. Finally, Atticus spies them playing and inquires as to whether or not their game is based on the Radley clan. Because she is afraid of getting in trouble, Jem lies to Atticus. The Radleys' house has a message stuck to it, but later he sees Jem and Dill using a fishing pole to attach it to the window. He realizes what they're doing and asks them to cease tormenting that man and quit playing the Boo Radley game, so they do as instructed. On Dill's last day in town, the kids obey him for a short time before sneaking into the Radley house and peering in through a loose shutter. After a while of being successful in their game, They are startled by a shadowy figure in the room with a hat and run. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a shotgun being fired behind them. On the retreat, Jem's pants get caught in a fence and have to be yanked free with a stomp of the foot. They have been stitched back together and put on the fence when Jem sneaks in later, allowing him to reclaim his pants. The next day, the kids discover a ball of gray twine tucked away in the knothole. Chewing gum, a spelling bee medal, an ancient pocket watch, and 2 soap figures carved to look like Jem and Scout start appearing soon after that. The Finches discover the knothole has been sealed off with cement one day. Nathan Radley explains that he cut down the tree because it was dying. Miss Mahdi's house is set on fire a short time later. He wakes up the kids and they all run out to help preserve what remains of the house. Scout is waiting for her father on the curb when someone throws a blanket over her shoulders. It becomes clear to Atticus that she does not know who committed the crime, and Jem guesses that it was Boo Radley. The complete narrative of the knothole and the repaired pants is told to their father, and Atticus warns the children to keep it a secret. Scout is so terrified of Boo looming behind her that she is on the verge of passing out. Scout almost gets into a fight with a boy the following day when he makes fun of her over a case Atticus recently purchased. Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping a white lady, is defending himself in this case. Affirming Scout's sense of fairness, Atticus says he decided to take the case because he believed Tom is innocent. But Scout later hears her father declare that Tom Robinson is surely doomed since an all-white jury would be impossible to acquit. As soon as their father's support of Tom Robinson begins, the children begin to receive remarks and abuse from their former friends and neighbors. People in Macomb, whose character portraits of the town's residents have largely been positive, begin to turn against the Finches because they are upset that Atticus, their best lawyer, is representing a black man. In the wake of Scout and Jem's exposure to the dark underbelly and prejudice of their beloved town, Scout and Jem begin to see the town in a new light. He warns the kids to stay out of fights and to rise above the taunts of the locals. By the end of the year, Dill had sent a letter to Macomb saying that his mother had married again, and he had moved in with her and the new man. As a result of this, plus the fact that Jem appears to be maturing and moving away from her, Scout is displeased with him. The housekeeper, Calpurnia, decides to take Scout and Jem to her church on a Sunday afternoon. Even though this is the town's one and only black church, it only has one hymnal and very few of its parishioners are able to read. The youngsters are surprised. Children are often welcomed and told that they know Atticus by members of the congregation. Tom Robinson was charged by the father of the white girl's mother, Bob Yule. Scout learned this after the service. Scout wonders why anyone would take Yule's accusations seriously, because he's the local drunk. While Jem and Scout are in town for the trial, they have to deal with additional gossip and judgmental eyes. A night after Atticus breaks up the quarrel and puts Jem and Scout to sleep, they discover that Dill is hidden under Scout's mattress. In his story, Dill claims he ran away from home because his parents didn't care about him anymore. He claims he took a train to the station, then rode on the back of a cotton wagon to get the rest of the way there. Jem informs Atticus, who then provides the youngster with food and a bed before heading over to his Aunt Rachel's house to inform her of his presence. A group of guys led by the sheriff shows up at the Finch's door a week later. To prevent a lynch mob from developing in Macomb, Tom Robinson will be sent to the Macomb jail as his trial approaches. A couple of nights later, Atticus gets up bright and early to head into town for the night. A newspaper is found in his hands in the Macomb jail yard when Jem, Scout, and Dill slip out to catch him reading it. They don't seem to bother Jem, according to him. 4 cars pull up, and a group of guys get out and order Atticus to move away from the jailhouse door as they turn to depart. Scout, Jem, and Dill rush to Atticus' defense when he refuses. Atticus is concerned about the safety of the children and orders them to return home, but they resist. A member of the crowd gives Atticus 15 seconds to flee with his children. Scout spots the father of one of her classmates, Mr. Cunningham, in the crowd. She brings up his son, and Mr. Cunningham becomes embarrassed and orders the guys to depart. From a nearby window, the town's newspaper owner remarks after they leave Mr. Underwood. Tells Atticus, "I had him covered all the time," and points a shotgun at him, as if to demonstrate. When Mr. Underwood and Atticus finish their conversation, Atticus drives the youngsters home. The trial is set to begin the following day. People from all around the county turn up to support both sides in the courtroom. An informal judge, Judge Taylor, preside over the case. Scout and Jem come late to the trial and are only able to obtain seats in the balcony where the black audience is required to sit thanks to Reverend Sykes from Calpurnia's church. Before presenting his case, Mr. Gilmer confronts the sheriff and town doctor, both of whom admit to having spoken to white woman Maella Ewell about being raped by Tom Robinson. The doctor also noted that Maella's facial bruises were concentrated on the right side of her face. Bob, Maella's father, will take the witness stand next. Town alcoholic Bob Ewell has been dubbed the unpleasant, nasty little man. He claims to have heard Maella's screams and observed Tom Robinson raping her from a window on the night in question. It happened so fast that Ewell had to contact the town sheriff, and Robinson had to flee. Atticus notes that the witness is left-handed when he asks him to write his name on a piece of paper. When someone is on their right side, he is more likely to strike them. When Tom Robinson entered Maella's home, Maella paid him a cent to dismantle a dresser for her, but he took advantage of her once he was there. During Atticus's questioning, she explains that Robinson's left hand was paralyzed after a cotton gin accident when he was a boy. When Atticus interrogates Maella, he wants to know if she really believes that Tom didn't rape her and that her father actually beat her instead. Maella breaks down in tears and refuses to answer any more questions, showing just how upset she is. The next witness is Robinson, who says that on his way home from work, he often helps the Ewells with modest chores. According to him, on the night in question, Maella asked him to come inside and fix a door for her, but he found that there was nothing wrong with it when he arrived. When he went onto a chair to retrieve a box from a dresser, Maella grabbed his legs and pulled him down. She grabbed his waist and asked him to kiss her, which frightened him to the extent that he jumped to the ground. Father appeared at the window and called Maella a whore, promising to kill the girl. For his own safety, Tom departed. Now that the defense has taken a seat, Mr. Gilmer can begin grilling Tom. Aside from his previous disorderly conduct charge, Tom admits he has the strength to choke and drop a woman with only one hand. Forcibly coerces Tom into saying that the only reason Maella gets support from him is out of empathy. In Macomb, black people aren't supposed to feel sorry for white people, and this upsets the courtroom audience. Atticus addresses the jury after Tom has finished questioning them. This prosecution has presented no medical proof and simply offered up two suspect witnesses, according to him. Also, the physical evidence points to Bob Ewell as the one who physically abused his daughter. On the other hand, he starts a new narrative, one in which the despondent Maella becomes enamored with and then accuses a black guy of sexual assault. Rather of falling for Ewell's deception, Atticus pleads with the jury to see Tom Robinson for who he really is and liberate him. They adjourn to meet again later. Calpurnia storms into the courtroom and offers Atticus a note informing him that his children have not returned home since midday. He asks Calpurnia to take them home as soon as he realizes that they are in the upper balcony. Atticus advises the children to go home for supper and that they can come afterward, knowing that the jury would certainly return before then. Go back to your house to eat fast before returning to learn that the jury hasn't decided. No one leaves, but the jury does not return until after midnight that night, and they find the defendants guilty. Those in the balcony rise to their feet to show their respect for Atticus as the courtroom begins to empty. That night, Jem weeps because of the unfairness of the decision. Following that, the black residents of Macomb deliver enormous amounts of home-cooked food to the Finch household. That the judgment has disappointed Jem, he says, is due to the fact that he had high expectations for the village of Macomb. By remaining outside for as long as they did during their deliberations, Miss Mahdi points out that this indicates an improvement in the county's race relations. Bob Ewell promised revenge on their father for damaging his public image that morning, the children learn as they leave Miss Mahdi. It appears that Atticus is not concerned about Bob Ewell's threat, and that he assumes the other man has now dealt with the issue and will no longer be a nuisance to him and his children. While Tom Robinson's appeal is pending, he has been sent to a different prison in a different county. While Atticus claims that Tom has a good chance of being pardoned, he has to confess that he would wind up in the electric chair if it wasn't for Scout's question. It was fortunate that the jury deliberated for so long, and in Alabama courts, the white man's remarks always prevailed over the black man's. Atticus agrees with Miss Mahdi. Atticus discovers that Tom Robinson attempted to escape from prison and was shot 17 times a few months later. He takes Calpurnia with him to inform the Robinsons of Tom's death. Atticus was on his way to the Robinsons' house when Jem and Dill met and persuaded him to let them follow him. He claims that they witnessed Helen Robinson, Tom's wife, fall to the ground and begin to weep before Atticus had a chance to explain what had happened. People in Macomb shake their heads and mutter something like typical of a black man when Tom tries to flee. In his newspaper, Mr. Underwood calls the death the murder of an innocent man, and Bob Ewell is overheard remarking that Tom's death makes one down and about two more to go as a result of the incident. Dill will be leaving soon, as the season closes. As the new school year begins, Jem and Scout will once again be walking by the Radley residence on a daily basis. They are no longer afraid of the house or its occupants, but Scout still longs to meet Boo Radley for the first time in person. The family is still haunted by the trial and Bob Yule's threat. In an apparent attempt to intimidate both Judge Taylor and Helen Robinson, Bob begins to follow them around the house. He walks her home afterward after Scout secures a role in the school's Halloween performance. They hear someone behind them on their way home and, afraid, start to flee. As a result of her costume, Scout is unable to go on many of her planned adventures. When their adversary attacks Jem, he tries to help her. Scout tries to save her brother among the chaos, but she is squashed as she flees. Her assailant is yanked backwards unexpectedly. Scout tries to find Jem on the ground, but he only finds the body of an unshaven, whiskey-drinking man. There is a man bringing Jem toward the house as she runs back home. The sheriff and a doctor are called by Atticus after they arrive at home and report that someone has attacked his son. Atticus is informed by the doctor that Jem has a broken arm, but he should be fine. Scout does not identify the man who brought Jem home during the exam. That Bob Yule had been found dead in an undergrowth with a knife in his chest by the sheriff. Scout recognizes Boo Radley as the man who carried Jem home as she tells her version of the story to the adults. Scout and Boo sit on the porch and listen to the argument between Atticus and the sheriff. Atticus believes that his son killed Bob Yule and does not want him to be sheltered from the law in this regard. Despite knowing that Boo killed Bob Yule, the sheriff persisted on reporting that Yule fell on his knife. He claims Tom Robinson died for no cause, and now that the person responsible for his death has been assassinated, it's time to move on. Scout takes Boo home. A few minutes after he enters his house, he claims he never sees her again, but for one brief instant, she experienced the world through his eyes. The next time she visits, she is surprised to see Atticus reading a book to his daughter Jem. Scout listens to her father's voice as she drifts off to sleep in Jem's room. Scout Finch, the story's central character and narrator. Scout, a 6-year-old girl from Macomb, Alabama, lives in a spacious house with her widowed father, older brother, Jem, and their housekeeper, Calpurnia. She has no recollection of her mother, who died when she was 2. As the town's campaign against Tom Robinson takes a toll on Scout's trust in humanity, she begins to question her own beliefs. A tomboy with an aggressive streak, Scout often gets into battles to defend her family's honor, despite her gender. Because she is so young, the Tom Robinson trial often leaves her perplexed and befuddled, and she struggles to keep up, learning about the law as she does about the people of the community. Towards the book's conclusion, Scout has grown up by 3 years. She's older, but also a little bit more cynical. However, it is evident that she is still able to appreciate generosity in others. Atticus Finch, one of literature's all-time great heroes. Both father and moral core, he is an attorney with an unwavering sense of morality and justice. He is the Finch family. Tom Robinson is a case that he takes on because of his strong belief in racial equality and his dedication to upholding the law. Atticus stays firm against the protests of the white residents of Macomb, and he instills in his children a strong sense of morality through daily lessons. Atticus is clearly devastated by the end of Tom Robinson's trial and his life in general, but he does not appear to have changed fundamentally by the end of the novel. He continues to look for the good in people, take care of his children, and preserve the beliefs that he holds most dearly. Jeremy Atticus Jem Finch, older Scout's brother and playmate. At 10, Jeremy's main preoccupation is what game to play that day, and at the book's conclusion, he is a wise young man on the edge of his adolescent years. At the loss of the Robinson trial, he may be even more distraught than Scout, but he is better at keeping it under wraps until they are alone. He's less defensive than Scout, and he's always on the lookout for ways to keep Scout out of trouble when she gets angry. Scout's protector, Jem, spends most of the book's scenes verbally and physically defending her. Arthur Boo Radley, a reclusive Macomb resident, has become something of an urban legend. When he was younger, he is said to have murdered his father. Now he lives with his brother in the family's dilapidated home. As indicated by the gifts and food the children find in the tree's knothole and is saving their lives at the end of the book, it is clear that he is a decent man, despite his apparent mental impairment and difficulty communicating with others. According to certain accounts, Boo was mentally damaged by his abusive father and stands as a fresh example of an innocent person who has been tainted by mankind's evils. Bob Yule, the father of Macomb's poorest family and an unemployed drunk with more children than he can care for. Tom Robinson is accused by Yule of raping his daughter in order to avoid admitting that he beat her. His persona exemplifies the uglier, more bigoted aspect of the South in the 1930s. Tom Robinson, the black man accused of raping Maella. The novel portrays Tom as a victim of the town's racial prejudices. The townspeople's hatred corrupts him as another source of good in the tale. Robinson is shot and killed by the jail guards at the book's conclusion. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.